Hello, I'm Kayla Key, presenting Feminist Care in the Anthropocene, Packing and Unpacking Tensions in Posthumanist HCI, on behalf of my co-authors, Callie Gatehouse and Nick Taylor. This paper presents results from the workshop Alternative Care Translations, which gathered designers, researchers, philosophers, and artists working at the intersection of care and posthumanist, post-anthropocentric, or more than human design, to explore practices, theories, and open questions around the enduringly normative and Eurocentric ways of engaging with more than humans, and to explore how we might conduct research differently in the face of such sticky normativity. Through layering posthumanist, feminist, and indigenous knowledges, combined with a making as knowing approach, this work showcases how ethics can be used to concretely attend to productions of subjects and objects, and how those anthropocentric mechanisms of production shape the capacities of care relations between humans and non-humans. We contribute a discussion of epistemological care and urge practitioners to take up new ways of imagining through truly messy methods, which contribute to an intersectional feminist unsettling of HCI's methodological commitments, practices, and praxis. As HCI designers and researchers work to recognize the human exceptionalism, which has made its lasting mark on this planet through exploitative and destructive activities, we've also begun to see our role as complicit in many of those consequences, and have rightly begun asking ourselves what kinds of things, worlds, and futures are being produced from those anthropocentric and objectifying standpoints. With these concerns comes the need to care in new and scalar ways. Care as a feminist practice is about attending to what, how, and when things get carrying attention and come to matter, and what, how, and when things don't. We argue it's crucial to adopt non-anthropocentric ethics as an essential part of research and design. In the same way that posthumanist HCI has been driven to reject boundaries between humans and non-humans, ethics of care and relationality reject the humanist assumption of a proper boundary between ethics, agency, epistemology, and ontology. Euro-Western discourse often treat the Anthropocene and undergirding Cartesian divide as a teleological fact. However, the notion of an ethical imperative to recognize the life-giving relationships between humans and non-humans, and that such an ethic would account for how the past is simultaneously enacted in the present, therefore shaping how we conceptualize the future, is well understood and practiced in many indigenous philosophies of ecology. So in addition to the feminist Euro-Western body of theoretical work on care and posthumanism, this paper turns to indigenous cosmologies, which precede and in many ways exceed modern posthumanist thought. We are motivated by a humble and genuine desire to learn from scholars and exemplars whose place-based and relational praxis has a lot to teach. Yet, the authors, I am a Euro-Western scholar who have benefited from settler colonialisms. So while we've tried to understand and learn from indigenous perspectives, we do not claim them as our own and recognize the invaluable, yet often unidirectional benefit they provide. To open up conversation and tease out tensions with posthumanist engagement, 2 workshops were held over the course of several weeks with 17 participants. The primary goal was to engage in posthuman speculation vis-a-vis care, and this was done through 2 individual embodied speculative activities, followed by small group discussions, and then a final collective group discussion at the end. After the workshops, what began as 2 discrete activities, zine making and a formal analysis, collapsed into a blended process of making, theme finding, and narrative building. And this resulted in 3 key findings or tensions with more than human engagement. The first tension, the representation problem, producing legitimate subjects of care, explores how care and representationalism are entangled in how non-humans are deemed worthy of certain forms of care. In questioning the subjects and objects of caring attention, participants not only confronted separations created through a reflexive representationalism, but also how those separations serve to legitimize or illegitimize care for non-humans. And within that process of legitimizing, care was often contextualized as an integral ethic of our humanity. This allows non-humans to fall into the same trap as other humans in need of someone's help, saving, or stewardship, which are the racialized, gendered, classist politics of benevolence for a suffering human, or in this case, thing. The second tension, the labor problem, labor is progress, labor is for the living, is about how unproductive labor by non-humans, which might be static, nonlinear, simple resistance or resilience, gets marginalized and overshadowed by the persistence of a modern paradigm that associates the future with progress, with an ethico-political imperative to advance. The third tension, the material problem, narratives of pureness and reconfiguration, explore how various forms of material and bodily reconfiguration challenge long-standing narratives around what is perceived to be pure, either pre-existing relation to humans or embodying certain preferred relations with humans, and how those narratives of pureness carry an unintended denial of non-human agency. Within these tensions is the seeming inescapability of anthropocentric epistemologies to reproduce anthropocentric ethics and modes of care. Through our explorations of how participants related to material configuration and legitimizing subjects, we began to understand that what and how we know, epistemology, and what and how we care, ethics, are bound together in cycles of replication. So by using unseen labor as a concrete through line, we attempted to paint a picture of how we might know differently in order to care differently. Finally, while exploring the romanticized materiality of subject-object cuts, it became clear that although those dualisms are not absolutes, they possess a haunting aesthetic capacity to marginalize non-humans. And as researchers committed to posthumanist agendas, we're necessarily working with a speculative aesthetic, because imagining non-human centered futures means trekking through relations not yet made or unmade. So we explore how there's a real risk in our speculations not being risky enough. In short, to speculate is not just to imagine a move, but to make a move through the speculating of it. It is not an external doing to a world, but rather an act of the world, a medium of its co-becoming. For more than human-centered design futures, the risk of avoiding methodologies because they make us feel uneasy, uncomfortable, unwelcome, uncared for, or shut out roots the very subject-object dualism and human exceptionalism we're trying to speculate ourselves out of. This is an important distinction because it means that risk does not rest solely on the shoulders of a human speculator, but that imaginative risk scales to the cosmological as a real and inseparable material of an entwined world. This underscores why HCI cannot run the risk of speculating more than human worlds from disembodied subject minds, and needs to continue relocating critical practices of imagining back within landscapes and between boundaries or cuts which sever the two in the first place. In some ways, this is quite an intuitive notion for a design audience, but as designers and researchers, we are materials to be reconfigured and reimagined as well, and stand to benefit possibly the most from these kinds of uncomfortable reconfigurations, as we hold the potential to transfer that imaginative aesthetic through our research materials. Without these truly messy methods, design and research runs the risk of once again displacing the same elsewhere from a position of nowhere. In conclusion, we recognize that engaging issues as deeply rooted as how to decenter design will likely not result in clear-cut directions or articulations. We admit to providing no answers, but believe that our process of investigating and responding matters more, because methodologies are a key site in which to enact non-anthropocentric ethics. Thank you.